Hey guys, this video is going to be all about the House of the Rising Sun in New Orleans, and everyone thinks it's a bordello. Nope, we're going to find out exactly what it was, because people are no longer in touch with the 19th century world, so they can't imagine what it could possibly have been. We will discuss it. But before we get to that, the t-shirt comp, you still got time. Due date April 17th. I've got 9 entries, so you got a chance. There's going to be 2 prizes, so you got a good chance. Check out the t-shirt video. I'm going to link it below. Also, I've got my book out, Confessions of the Gods. Do you know I often say in my videos, I'm going to prove it? Well, this video proves it. Definitive proof of an ancient, super high technology society. In fact, I would challenge any skeptic to read this and to at least fail to admit that there is something absolutely weird going on with the past, which suggests that there was a high technology civilization. Okay, let's get to it. Hello everyone. Again, we are going to look at the origin of the House of the Rising Sun. We're going to look at exactly what it was, not necessarily where it was, but I've done some digging. I wasn't very happy with Wikipedia. I wasn't very happy with the fact they're saying it's a bar or a bordello. We're going to look into both those theories. We're going to see exactly what this House of the Rising Sun actually was. And people in the 20th century couldn't really understand what it was, because you need to look at the former world and the former world of the poor, how things were run, how things operated. And I'll tell you what I think it was. And we're really going to get into this, and we have to go way back in time to really get into it. So let's start from the basics. The Animals released this song in 1965, and they actually based it, the lyrics and the melody, on a Bob Dylan version from 1962. So Bob Dylan essentially invented the modern incarnation of the House of the Rising Sun. But it was based on some lyrics from the 1930s, and those are the earliest recordings of this song. It seems to be an English folk melody, but it's got New Orleans lyrics, and the New Orleans lyrics refer to a house in New Orleans. So we want to find the house in New Orleans, and we're not really interested in what the previous words would have been, the English words. Maybe it would have been there is a house in London town instead of New Orleans. We're not really interested in the previous thing. So these are the earlier lyrics, and it's actually a bluegrassy sort of melody. It's there is a house in New Orleans, they call the rising sun. Well, I can't sing that very well. It's been the ruin of many a poor girl, and me, oh God, for one. So it's about girls. It's a girl's house. Okay. So Eric Burden is not going to say the word girl. If I'd listened to what Mama said, I'd be home today, being so young and foolish, poor boy, let a rambler lead me astray. Go tell my baby sister never to do what I have done, to shun that house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. Mother, she's a tailor, etc., etc. I'm married to drunkard. Lord drinks down in New Orleans. The only thing a drunkard needs is a suitcase and a trunk. The only time he's satisfied is when he's on a drunk. Fills his glasses to the brim, passes them around. The only pleasure he gets out of life is hoboing from town to town. One foot's on the platform, the other's on the train. I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain. Going back to New Orleans, my race is almost run. Going back to spend the rest of my life beneath the rising sun. Now you got to ask yourself, would you spend your life, if this is about a bordello, you wouldn't spend the rest, you wouldn't retire there, would you? If it's about a bar, you can't live in a bar without going bankrupt. I mean, it's not any of those two things. We'll look into that, but it's not those things. Here's an anonymous verse from Yorkshire. Hush-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When you grow old, your wages will stop. When you have spent the little you made, first to the poorhouse, and then to the grave. I think the House of the Rising Sun is about a poorhouse or a workhouse. So we will look into this. And if you look at Wikipedia, it's really quite interesting. They make something of this: to rest or lease the building known as the Rising Sun Coffee House opposite the entrance of the post office on Old Levee Street between Canal and etc. etc. It's quite interesting, but this is a red herring. So this is from the 1870s, 1867, ad noting the Rising Sun Coffee House. So on Wikipedia, in this article about the Rising Sun, Dolly Parton version, they're actually wondering, is this about the original House of the Rising Sun? And it isn't, because the 1930s version, which was recorded, it was based on essentially a legend that the bluegrass singer had heard from his grandfather and who had taught him the words. So it goes probably back to the 1700s at least, to the French colonial period. And I think the best clue here, we're not going to talk about all the bordellos and bars it could have been, but the best, very best clue here is from a biography. Dave Van Ron claimed in his biography, The Mayor of MacDougall Street, that at one time in New Orleans, someone approached him with a number of old photos of the city from the turn of the century. Among them was a picture of a forbidding stone doorway with a carving on the lintel of a stylized rising sun. It was the Orleans Parish Women's Prison. I think that's the best clue. And of course, Eric Burton himself visited the home of Marianne Le Soleil Levant. So the name of the woman was essentially the sun. And Eric Burton said after visiting at the behest of the owner, said the house was talking to me. So he thought that was one, but no, not at all. It's actually something more like a women's prison or a women's home or a workhouse. And the word workhouse isn't even mentioned in this entire article. It's about bars and things, and we'll show you why it can't possibly be a bar. It cannot in any way be a bar. So let's get to it. And we're going back in time. It starts with King Edward IV. He was of the House of York, and he is a funny looking man in this painting, but then again, painters couldn't really draw that good. They just seemed to at first glance. And he was of the House of York. And here is some imagery of the House of York. And I do encourage you to look into an article called Pub Names. And you will find out that every single pub name that you know in the British world is based on something. So, for example, Red Lion is the name of over 600 pubs in Britain. It can be the archetypal British pub. You've got names based on livery companies. So Three Arrows means it's owned by the worshipful company of bowyers who made bows, because, for example, these people would make bows. And the livery company, the guild, would invest in pubs, buying bricks and mortar. So another type of pub is the Rising Sun Hotel, the Rising Sun Pub, and people in every country know about this, and everyone's probably been to a Rising Sun pub or a Rising Sun hotel. Where does it come from? I think it's the emblem of the House of York, because on the one hand you had these Rising Sun pubs all over the place. England was caught in a civil war, and it all ended when Mr. Richard III, my kingdom for a horse, decided to lose the Battle of Bosworth, and that was all over. And afterwards, the houses of York and Lancaster combined to form the Tudor dynasty after a brief Lancastrian rule. So that's the House of Lancaster, the Red Lion, a bit of the French connection. The House of York is also a bit of a French connection with this sun, but they're the White Rose, and these ones are the Red Rose, and they were at war with each other. So I reckon after this, you had the Rising Sun pubs being built, and you had the Red Lion pubs also being built, depending on their respective territories during the Civil War. And it was very dignified to have your hotel or pub named after a royal crest as well. And we can even look up Rising Sun in this article. A symbol of the East and of optimism. The sun in splendour was the livery badge of Edward IV, and this is what put me onto this history. So it's not really the pub, because if we're looking for a pub called the Rising Sun, well, there are hundreds. And a rising sun is not really a place where you go to retire. It's not a place, although it is a place if it's a hotel, where you can slip into perdition. This is a gold real of Edward IV. It's got the sun. That's the old English Plantagenet crest, red lion. This is where the hotels got their name. Everyone wanted to be associated with the king. That's more Lancastrian stuff. The Cutlers Guild, all their pubs were called Elephant and Castle. And that's, you can see quite clearly where Elephant Castle comes from. It's a corruption of Castile, infant and Castile. Castile, if your pub was called Castile, it meant that you sold Castilian wine. So all these names actually meant something to customers. So they would say, "Oh, I'll go to the Castle pub because then I'll get the wine," right? Again, that's the logo of the Yorkists. So let's check the theory that the House of the Rising Sun is a pub. So we have the original Old Absinthe Bar, a tourist attraction in New Orleans. And this sold absinthe. And yeah, Mark Twain and other celebrities, Mark Twain went everywhere. That's the Old Absinthe Pub. We have here a rising sun motif above the door. And this is just fascinating. So is this the House of the Rising Sun? Absinthe made people go crazy. There was an absinthe craze in New Orleans and elsewhere. And as a result, absinthe was banned for about 100 years, but it's coming back strong. Because apparently it gave you hallucinations, because it's full of herbs and all sorts of strange things. So is this the House of the Rising Sun? That's the absinthe pub in the past. It's been around for a very, very long time. It could be. But not really, because New Orleans architecture, which is extraordinary, has rising suns everywhere, all over the damn place. Look at this. I'm going to zoom into this building. Do you see that upper window? It's got a sort of, it's shaped like a rising sun, and the lower window moves up and down. It's a sash window. They even made it look like a sun. So lots of houses, and this is just something random I found on Google Images. Lots of these houses in New Orleans have this rising sun imagery. This one is even painted red on this house. Again, look at the metalwork, the motifs. It's all about solar imagery. So there would have been thousands and thousands of New Orleans houses with these rising sun motifs. So I'm guessing the House of the Rising Sun had a very powerful, very strongly shaped motif. And we're going to look at one later, which I think is close. But I have to say, that whole House of the Rising Sun poem is so similar to William Hogarth's Harlot's Progress. William Hogarth, an English engraver. So here we have essentially this harlot who she goes to visit this woman for employment, and she's sort of been sucked in, but it's a bordello. And yeah, look, this one's got the pox. She's the boss. So I guess she meets a rich guy and they're hanging around, but she's a bit wild. She tips this table over, a bit crazy, and she's a bit of a pickpocket. She's stealing something, and here comes the judge with the men to arrest her. And she's taken, to a workhouse. And here she's working in the workhouse. She's got pox on her face. This guy's saying, "Hey, keep working, don't stop." And this guy is in the stocks, "Better to work than stand thus." And what's she doing? She's actually bashing away at a rope. So she's actually making something called oakum. And they would do this all day long, not allowed to talk to each other, just bashing away at the rope. And yep, that's it in more detail. Then she's dying over here. She's surrounded by crazy characters. And she's dead. She's in the coffin, surrounded by weird mourners. Oakum. This was made in workhouses all over the place. What it is it is essentially old ropes. The Navy got rid of their old ropes periodically. They wanted fresh ropes. It was sold to entrepreneurs running workhouses. And this stuff was used to seal up ships. It was used since Phoenician times. They had to bash and de-thread these ropes, and then they'd arrange them into a string. They'd get a spike, dip it in tar, then they would run this spike along the oakum, and they would create essentially a tarry string, which was used for sealing up ships, also sealing pipes together. Today, plumbers use a blowtorch on a copper pipe to bend the pipe to join the pipes, and a sort of red or blue glue. In the past, they used oakum fibers to join the pipes together, and they were called plumbum because they used PB lead. Then they'd pour molten lead over it to seal the joint. They didn't have a blowtorch. And the tools for making oakum, here we have people in this is a compulsory workhouse. So there were voluntary workhouses and compulsory workhouses, such as hard labor. So if you were working at hard labor, you would have to make over 1 kilo of this stuff every day, 1 kilo of threads. So you were working really hard, or you didn't eat enough. So these guys were just really working in private prisons, working hard. So crime really doesn't pay. It was a hellish existence in the low technology world. And if you got released from prison, you would be sent to a halfway house. And a halfway house, this is a home of industry and refuge for discharged convicts. It was kind of a house where you would live. And notice in that poem at the start, it's all about a house. It's not a pub. It's not a hotel. It's a house of the rising sun. It's a house. A place for living. So here you have, essentially, this is a workhouse in England. Golden clock. Here's another workhouse in England. Bit of a solar motif happening here. Hard workers from a workhouse. And it all goes back to the poor laws of the 1330s. They made vagrancy illegal after the Black Death because they didn't want the lower population of England. You know, 1/3 of people died. All the peasants were wiped out. All the nobles were wiped out. They didn't want people suddenly saying, oh, I'm now middle class. I'm not a feudal peasant anymore. Pay me more money, and going to a employer who was going to pay them more money. So what happened was, they said, okay, anyone leaving their town, this is illegal. They're a vagrant. So we're going to throw them in the workhouse. They can work. And a workhouse became a method of distributing money to the poor. Okay, we're going to give you the money, but we're not going to give it away for free. You have to work for it. So you come to the workhouse. And of course, there were these semi-illegal workhouses in Ireland until about the 90s, would you believe, the mid-90s, where essentially these were laundries, and they were operated... these were bad places. So orphan girls and girls of ill repute, but also girls who had committed very minor crimes or even no crimes, were locked away, and it was a hellish existence. They were not allowed to essentially communicate with the outside world. If they received letters from the family, the letters were read out loud to them. They were not allowed to touch them. They themselves were allowed to write letters, but these probably didn't reach the outside world. And they were kept hidden away. They were not allowed to talk. They were not allowed any music or anything. Here they are just ironing away, working hard. And it ruined their lives because after they were released, if they were released, they sort of wondered what the hell had happened to them, what that existence was all about. And essentially it was all about a bunch of do-gooding, I guess do-gooding people thinking they knew the best and what was best for other people, essentially. And of course there would be a psychopath ruling the whole thing, extracting some cash. That's what it's all about. So workhouses were for young orphans, but they were for also the aged and infirm. So here we have some old women of a workhouse. And here's a bunch of older men in a workhouse because they've got nowhere else to go. And just look at the expression on their faces. They're all downcast. They're probably not allowed to talk. This is from England. London, dinner time at the Marybone Workhouse in 1900, not so long ago. And they're doing whatever work they could do, whatever needed to be done. And these workhouses were run by entrepreneurs in accordance with the poor law. They took a risk, they got a certain amount of money for it, and they gave these people shelter. These people were sometimes paid, but not always. A women's workhouse. And these were terrible places. So I'm assuming the House of the Rising Sun is a workhouse. You will notice the start of the lyrics talk about a woman falling into perdition in a workhouse at the start of her life, and then she goes back to the House of the Rising Sun, and at the end of her life she takes a train, 1 foot on the platform, 1 foot on the train, and then back to the House of the Rising Sun. So it's undoubtedly a workhouse. Here is the gate of a workhouse in England. God save the king. It's very Victorian era. Here is the gate of another workhouse. Shout out to this site, Workhouses, because I've just found this on Google Images. And a gate like this affords you the opportunity to make this a kind of solar motif. Just like the clue about that women's prison in Orleans having a rising sun. But we have, of course, just seen that lots of buildings in New Orleans have a rising sun. And this is that building. This is that building that was mentioned in that clue. Apparently above the door there was a lintel somewhere with a rising sun over the door. That could have also been a solar motif. I don't know. This isn't high resolution enough. And this is also that prison. And let's zoom in a bit. And I don't think anyone has ever noticed this before. But we have some metalwork. This is a prison gate. I'm not sure if this is the men's prison or the women's prison in Orleans, but it's one of them. And here we have, and this is the only picture online, a solar imagery on a metalwork. So is this the House of the Rising Sun? Well, it might be or it might not be, but it gets even better. Because, you see, there were the nuns of St. Ursula, the Ursulines, who arrived in New Orleans in 1727. And they brought with them some solar imagery from France. And here they are, in Orleans, the slaves, they're being welcomed, and they set up their convents, the old Ursuline convent. It was set up in the French Quarter, but then they moved to the countryside because they found the council had built a road right through their convent. Here is the one they built in the countryside, and it's not high resolution enough to show you what I'm going to show you. But when I show you it, I think you'll be impressed. So let's look at another photo. That photo is also not high resolution enough to show you what I want to show you. Now, this was part of their convent that was dedicated to become an elite girls' school. This is what I want to show you. Here are the girls playing with the hoops, playing with all these 19th century toys, etc., etc. They're having a great time. Let's zoom in. Oh, above the door are a huge rising sun motif, and it's a girls' school. Right? This was the inside. There was a nice library. Oh, look at that. Look at these ancient swings. They're massive. They're enormous. Hand-built, custom-made, I would imagine. Everything here is hand-built, I mean, there wouldn't be many playgrounds, would there? And again, this is the best photo we have. I mean, there are so many old photos which are just fuzzy, so we just can't tell what's going on. But you see quite clearly, there is a rising sun on this building. Is this the House of the Rising Sun, this elite girls' school? I don't think so. Because it's about a poor girl who would not be in an elite girl school. But I think that there were imitators of this place. And they took it upon, this was built in the early 19th century, they took it upon themselves to, with their own institutions, place these solar rays above institutions for girls and women because it was a sign of optimism, a sign of the East pointing towards Jerusalem, a sign of redemption. So the House of the Rising Sun was of this tradition. It was of this tradition. And of course, this is another St. Ursula gate, and it would have had the opportunity for solar imagery around this because it looks like a rising sun. And of course, the fact it was in that triangular alcove above the door makes it similar to the Eye of God, or as it is in Europe, or the Eye of Providence, as it's called in America. So not only is it a symbol of God, the rising sun, but it's also a symbol of a woman's institution where they would try and get redemption for some kind of sinful lifestyle or vagrancy or whatever. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is, I think, what the House of the Rising Sun actually is. She says, tell my sister, don't do what I've done. Stay away from the House of the Rising Sun. Because, of course, workhouses really were voluntary institutions. They were places where you could essentially visit, you could join, but you could also leave. But if you stayed there, you'd stay there forever, because you would catch the contagion of negativity and you wouldn't leave. If you were a prisoner, you would have to work hard labor, and it would be an awful, awful existence. So the song is about a prison, or it's a women's prison, or it's about a woman's workhouse in New Orleans. I am sure that someone will be able to locate it if you simply go into an archive, a photo archive, New York Public Library, something like that. I don't have the American links. I don't know what they are. I'm sure it can be found. I don't have the time. You, if you're listening to this, could be the first person to locate the actual House of the Rising Sun. Guys, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. It's been a pleasure doing a bit of research on this, and cheers. Bye-bye.